This is Syndey.
And this is Chloe.
And this is Green Room, where a bunch of pastors' kids get to talk about what church is like and our experiences. Well, welcome back to the Green Room.
Bum, bum.
I'm Syndey. This is Chloe.
Hi.
And we are kind of going to pick back up from our conversation last episode, just talking about the craziness, our experience of watching the information come out, a little bit of people's responses, how that affected us a little bit. And then do you want to start? Jump back in?
So just kind of resuming or summarizing, we talked about those like initial statements the end of October that were lacking, I would say, from kind of the IHOP point. And I also want to state that from October to now, there's been a few iterations of leadership.
Yeah. So
I'm not necessarily blaming the current leadership for decisions that were made by the former.
Absolutely, for sure.
So once all those statements were made that one weekend, it began almost like a battle.
Yes.
Of information and then disinformation and lies, just straight up lies, accusations and stuff. So that was really hard to watch because at that point I was like, you know what? I'm going off social media.
Yep.
I don't need to see all of this. I would get updates from my friends who would send me screenshots.
Right.
So, and memes. I wanted all the memes and all the hate message saying, I hope the Roberts all go to hell. I don't really need that.
Yeah.
For my mental health.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
once those statements kind of happened, that's when certain news sources started getting wind of stuff. So, I mean, KMBC, so Kansas City News Broadcast, maybe?
Sure.
I don't know.
We should know this.
Wait, no, it's KNBC. I have no idea, actually. They're the news.
Yeah, I don't know. Local news.
So they got wind of it. The Roy's report, something else, Chicago something, got news of it. And so they were, getting quotes from the Advocate, Complaint Group, and also IHOP. And those couple of weeks, I was really waking up to these people I've known them my entire life. They were my pastors. They were people I looked up to. These people were my mentors, and they are failing.
Epically failing.
And not only like making poor leadership choices, but slandering our family, slandering our parents. Like, so just a few examples were in meetings at IHOP with like middle managers. It was being said that this is a conspiracy theory by Dwayne Roberts so that he can take over IHOP.
Yeah.
Like, you think Dwayne wants to take over IHOP?
Right.
You out of your freaking mind?
Yeah.
Hard pass.
Have you looked around recently? Things ain't going so well.
Yeah. Or that the Advocate Group approved of all these lawyers being brought in, and they most definitely did not approve. And
oh, yeah. They didn't approve of any of them, especially when it was like an ELT member's like family friend.
Yeah. No,
I was like,
the
what?
Advocate Group does not approve of that kind of stuff.
No.
So there was so much disinformation and straight up like BS being said.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, my parents are pastoring a church in our house. And there was former IHOPers, there were current IHOPers at the time, and everyone is like freaking out, going, what were we a part of? Do we need to leave? Do we need to stay on staff? Do we need to leave of absence?
Right.
And I don't think I've ever seen my parents like work as hard and such long hours. And that's saying something.
Yeah. That's saying a lot because they've done a lot of things.
Yeah.
Really intense, a lot of things. But yeah, I think that, because I was on social media for a couple of days. And at first I was like, okay, this will be fine. There was a lot of like reposting and of, the statement by the advocacy group and just like slightly positive things when it first kind of happened. Like there was a fair amount of people that were kind of like on the brinks of leaving IHOP already / ex-IHOPers or ex-IHOPU people, alum or whatever you want to call them. And they were all like, oh, we believe this kind of a thing.
Right.
And they were somehow, so a lot of them were also like friends of mine that know kind of my parents or know the Hoods or like there's some slight connection. And then all of a sudden it turned into just unhinged people going insane.
Yes.
And it was like, I mean, some of the things said, I just remember like reading some comments, and I think
comment section, man.
Dude, it was insane. It was insane. And some like slightly like, because I don't know if you've picked up on this, but like jokes, especially kind of slightly dark jokes, is how we process things. And it kind of just helps. And so some of the comments of like people believing all of these accusations were, I thought, really hysterical at first. And then all of a sudden it started getting like really just like
bloody,
cutthroat.
almost.
Yeah, like as if like no one was a Christian and people were just being disgusting and spreading like false lies and all this kind of stuff. But then at the same time, while there's like all this false stuff being said, there's also real accusation. Like more stuff is coming out about other leaders at IHOP about. So like it made everything confusing and no one believed anyone. And like I remember around the time, like I was so nervous to come back here because like
I lived here.
Yeah, we're in St. Louis. And so I was already feeling a lot, and like I had some weird connections because Mike was in St. Louis before he ended up in Kansas City. There was already some weird, like people were kind of drawing conclusions and connections to St. Louis stuff that had happened. And then all of a sudden I was kind of in the middle of that, like hearing and trying to help people process, but then I'm also trying to process at the same time. And so I remember being like, I just need to get off social media, because reading certain comments, like I remember one time just reading, and it was some guy of just going off of like, Dwayne Roberts, you deserve to go to hell right now. Yeah. And it was like,
I don't need to read this. I don't need this.
Yeah.
Y'all nuts.
And I think like we've experienced people being horrible to our parents before, but this was at like another level. It was another level. And it was so, it spread like wildfire. And it wasn't just like within the Kansas City community. It was all over the place, other countries. People are like, just saying whatever they wanted to. It was just so intense.
Rough. It was so intense. And living here and living with my parents, like I just worked from home for a while and I didn't want to leave the house. None of us wanted to leave the house. Yeah. Our church was phenomenal and like brought us meals and gave us gift cards so we didn't have to go anywhere.
I love that. That's cool.
But it like, so I manage my parents' like contact email. So if I would, a couple times a week look through, I would delete all the hate mail and forward them the important or nice stuff. But some of the hate mail was actually just hilarious of like, you are shaming the name of Grandview. And I'm like, that's the point you want to make?
You're like, out of all of the things.
And nobody cares about Grandview and nobody even knows where that is.
Yeah, most people.
Outside of Kansas City.
Yeah.
But I think as more information started to come out, there were basically two camps. It was the current IHOPers are people who've been heavily influenced by IHOP, and literally everybody else. Yeah. Everybody else, especially Gen Z and millennials, were able to see through some of the facade. And they're like, we've seen this before. We've seen Carl Lenz. We've seen Ravi Zacharias. We've seen Bill Hybel. And we're not buying it. We're not buying IHOP's or Mike's letter of repentance he put out in December, whatever. We're not buying any of that. Yeah. So it was helpful to realize, okay, the broader body of Christ knows Mike's guilty as crap. Yes. It's this select group that doesn't. And unfortunately, they're on my algorithm. Right.
They're coming up.
So that was, and again, living in Kansas City, it's really hard to escape because I work. I mean, luckily everyone in my job is incredible and has always like supported the advocate group. But sometimes going to work or leaving the house was just a lot.
So much.
And I mean, it was a rough couple of months. Yeah. And then reading articles where they're quoting members of the IHOP leadership team where I'm like, you just betrayed my 20 or 25 years of friendship. Like that statement right there when you're casting doubt on my parents' character. Yeah. I'm like, I thought I knew you and you have supported our family in every other season and all of a sudden it's gone.
Like in seconds.
And I also want to just note the complexity of the situation because like my parents were missionaries at YWAM for 10 years before getting to IHOP, meaning they had leadership experience beforehand. A lot of the ELT members became leaders at IHOP and had no other frame of reference for healthy leadership.
Right.
And that's really hard because it makes a huge difference. And I think, I mean, it's really sad because IHOP and Mike and his style of leadership, which is narcissism and other things, is all they've ever known. So they don't even, I mean, it would have taken a move of God for them to respond in a different way.
Yeah.
I think, which I was very open to.
Yeah. In my head, I was just kind of always like, they didn't have a chance. Which is, and
they're all in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah. It sounds like such a doom and gloom like thing to say, but they really didn't. Like, and it's not in any way of an excuse saying it's okay what they did or they get a pass. Because
they were groomed by Mike to respond in this way.
Oh, 100%.
And like stuff, like I believe that a lot of the ELT members, a lot of IHOP leadership were groomed in a way by Mike, and not of sexual abuse, but they were victims of Mike.
Absolutely.
But there comes a point where a victim becomes culpable for their own actions, and I think that's reflective of a lot of the ELT.
And what's hard is that line can be very gray.
And I mean, this stuff is so complicated.
So complicated. Yeah. I remember I was looking for it as you were talking. Because after, when was this?
I just thought you were bored.
Oh, no.
Scrolling.
You're fascinating, Chloe.
Thank you.
She's single, guys.
By choice.
Okay, so in February, I wrote this. And this is when I was like, you know what? Maybe I should get back on. And just kind of like...
Internet fight.
Yeah, honestly. Because it was like, well, no, that came later. And then I had to apologize and like delete some stuff. But this was like... When was Eric Volz there?
I think he came November, December.
Yeah.
Like we should talk about Eric, but you can read this first.
So I just kind of, it was a little bit around the time when things started to shift slightly. And people.
Because this whole situation ebbed and flowed. Yeah. Most people took breaks during the holidays, which was really nice.
It was really great. I appreciated it. I actually got to have a Christmas with my family. But I wrote, wow, it's really scary to think that I grew up here, idolized, loved, thought I would inherit. I have no words to describe all of my intense emotions, but somehow so much makes sense to me now. It hurts to see what I loved and what my family slowly, what I loved and what was family slowly burn in the fire we all built together, a fire we thought was all for the glory of Jesus, while all along there was a deep tie to a feeder program for a narcissistic, sociopathic predator.
Well said.
Yeah. And it was like, it felt freeing to finally be able to say something so intense, because it was like the first time that I was just like, this is it. You know what I mean?
I've processed enough. I feel articulate enough to go.
Yeah. Like, and a lot of people then commented like, oh, it wasn't just for Mike. And, you know, and I'm like, no, like,
that's not the point.
That's not the point, guys. The point is we grew up basically, and I swing back and forth if it was
a cult or
not,
Yeah.
to be honest.
It's
like,
a hard
because again,
say.
it's one of those things like the closer you were to Mike, things were a little very different than just if you were on staff in the prayer room or a musician or a singer. And you know what I mean? Like you could leave, but you couldn't really leave. And you like,
if you were cut off.
Yeah. And if you go back and actually read the 7,
oh my gosh.
What was it? Okay. The 7.
So early on, I went onto IHOP's website because I was looking for one of their statements. And I didn't know, like, did they post it on their website somewhere? So I'm like looking around for this statement, and I scroll down and it's like recommended reading 7 characteristics of a cult. And I was like, yes, I was looking for this, but this is what I want.
Yep.
So I click on it, and it's from a message in 2012, which is when a girl was murdered.
Yeah.
We will talk about that later. I think it's funny. That's just a blip on IHOP's timeline and not like what it should be.
Yeah.
Anyways. So apparently he did this series in like 2005, 2006, but he brought it back 2012.
Let me see.
And it lists the 7 characteristics of a cult. Oh my gosh. It was terrifying to read. Of like more loyalty to the organization than your family. If you leave, you're cut off. Just several things where I was like, oh, this hurts to read.
Yeah.
And I think growing up, there were so many jokes about IHOP being a cult because people had called it out as a cult for years.
Right.
And we just thought it was funny.
Yeah, and it was one of those like, oh, they're just offended.
Yes, that was the term that was used. If anybody leaves, they're offended, we don't listen to them anymore. Right. And if they say something negative about anyone, oh, they're offended, we don't listen to them anymore. So that the word offended got branded on everyone.
Yeah, if you left at all, it was
you were
stupid.
offended.
Literally, the first thing out of the 7 is the opposite critical thinking. So if you think different than me, i.e., if you think that Mike Bickle did all these things.
Yeah. Or even on another podcast, there's come out this meeting that happened in like 2014. We were in Kansas City at the time. But it was basically these 5 students going, there was a disagreement about theology. Mm-hmm. That right there. Literally. And they were villainized for it.
Yeah.
And going, okay, that's so not insane. Healthy. Like a healthy leader is actually open and wants differing opinions. Mm-hmm. That was never, ever going to happen with Mike.
Yeah.
Or anyone. Or, yeah.
It was crazy. Okay, so back to Eric Volz.
Yeah, so I should have looked this up. I can't remember exactly when Eric came on the scene. I'm thinking November, December. But oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Eric Volz. I think Eric was possibly the most unhelpful thing that happened in this whole process.
Absolutely.
So he first shows up on these videos where, he's wearing the same shirt and everyone's making fun of him for wearing the same shirt because they were supposedly filmed on separate days. But it's like, dude, you just did a filming session.
Totally. Yeah.
And this photo was going around the internet of he did a photo shoot for Focus on the Family that is so like...
It feels like Abercrombie & Fitch, like model.
Yeah, like you're going for Vogue People magazine shoot, but it's focused on the family. I'm like, you're not supposed to look seductive on
totally.
On a Focus on the Family shoot.
So that
was my introduction to Eric Volz.
Can we insert it? Like,
I'll try and find it. So that was my introduction to Eric Volz. Not great. Ugh. And so there were all of his videos, and I was like, wait, who is this dude?
Yeah. Because I remember you texting me the picture and I had no context of who he was. And I was just like, Chloe, what the frick? Like, why are you... This is a weird, creepy picture. And I didn't realize that it was Eric. Volz. And so then I had a friend actually at my church in St. Louis be like, have you heard this Eric Volz guy? And I was like, ugh, no. What did he do now? And then she showed me his picture and I was like, oh, that's the guy!
Totally. And so... he started doing these videos that were just so deadpan. It was weird. But it as someone who was raised at IHOP, it almost was hurtful to bring in someone who has no history with IHOP, doesn't know the people, doesn't know the culture.
I would say it is hurtful.
Yes, or was it is hurtful. Like to go, you don't represent IHOP, you don't represent the thousands of people who have shed blood, sweat, and tears in that prayer room.
Absolutely.
And it was offensive to go, you shouldn't be representing these people. Yeah. Like you are paid most likely a lot of money to come in here and basically run a disinformation campaign.
A smear campaign.
Yeah. And you don't know anything.
Yeah.
You don't know anything.
Yeah.
So.
Or you do, and then you're just spreading lies to cover stuff up.
Yeah.
Because according to him, the crisis is over.
And this place is safe for your children and family.
Everybody.
So what was a really painful video was this must have been early, December. I go over to my friend's house and she pulls out and she's like, oh, look, like the Minister of Truth released another video. That was his nickname. I mean, he had a few others, but let's stick with that one.
Yep.
And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to watch this. But she plays it. And immediately he's like, with a heavy heart, I want to inform you that Stuart Greaves has resigned as director of International House of Prayer. I was like blindsided by that.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Members of the ELT found out in that video. Staff members I found out in that video. And I was like,
Yeah.
First off, I think it was right that Stuart resigned.
Totally. Yeah.
But it still was like, oh, wow, this is not a dream. This is still happening. And that was so dishonoring.
It was like yet another person that we grew up with and
Admiring.
had loved and admired. Their lives are getting ruined. And it's kind of like when I was like, well, you did some not great stuff. Like,
right.
It was healthy, the right move for you to be,
resign.
Having to resign. But at the same time, it was just like, oh, wow. Like,
it was just a reminder, I think, of like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening.
Sobering.
It was sobering. It was just sad.
Yeah.
And I was angry that this Eric dude broke the news in the weirdest way. Mm-hmm. And that even the staff members who had known him for years found out on Instagram.
Yeah. So dishonoring.
So dishonoring to people that I still love at IHOP. Like, that was weird. That was weird.
Yeah.
And just sad. It really was sad.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I've felt this before when I wake up in the morning and I realize, oh, this hasn't all been a nightmare. Like, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
The prayer room that's been going on my entire life is screeching to a halt almost and going, oh my, is this happening?
Totally. I feel like I have a lot of like really good friends and people around me in St. Louis, and they would just be like, are you okay? Like, what's going on?
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. And I would just be like, honestly, my life feels like a telenovela. Mm-hmm. And then at every end of the episode, there's a cliffhanger. But then there's new characters introduced every episode that you don't know if you're going to love them or hate them.
And then there's the evil twin that shows up.
Yeah, exactly. And they try and kill you and take over your body.
Right. It's just, that's a great example.
Like, it was just a continual, like, new episode, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the next couple months, there was kind of a string of resignations. And for a while, it was like, okay, half the ELT's gone. Like, who's in control?
Yeah.
And then General Kirt Fuller shows up.
I honestly feel bad for him.
I think he had no idea what he was getting into.
No idea.
And, I mean, the church and the military are very different.
Very, very different.
Nobody is required to respond.
Thankful.
Nobody's required to trust you. Nobody's required to do what you want.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't realize that.
And I think, though, too, even watching some of the statements he made and things like that, he was being manipulated and fed false information. And
he didn't really do his due diligence.
No. And came to some conclusions that
were wrong.
And
like documentaries versus videos.
Yeah. But, like, I think even just that, it just, I don't know.
It was confusing for a while because it was like, oh, maybe this guy's different.
Yeah.
And
there was hope. It was
there
like,
was hope for like
good.
a second.
Yeah.
And then that whole,
it's going
all
down.
The advocate,
we're yelling timber.
The advocate group has lied to me thing was like, no, you didn't understand, or I don't know, the difference between a 20-minute video and a documentary. Like, those are two different things. So that was his enough video. And I'm like, the church isn't a sovereign state that you get to control. Like, this is not the government. This is not the military. Mm-hmm. There's so much nuance. There's so much you don't understand.
Yeah.
And yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that one was just really hard.
That was rough.
Because I don't think
he's malicious.
No, I don't think he's malicious. I really do think that there's a level that he was manipulated himself. And so he thought he was doing the right thing.
Right.
Which then, of course, come to find out, clearly is not.
Backfired.
But I just feel bad for him and then his family too. Because I'm like, that's really intense. Like, I can't imagine.
You can't imagine having your family like blasphemed against. What?
It's kind of like, it feels weird to say that out loud because I'm like, it's literally like our lives. But but I just can't imagine, because like mom and dad have always come out as like, eventually there's typically a big chunk of pain and they're all liars and da-da-da. But then even now it's like, okay, advocacy groups, like they're good people, like Dwayne and Jennifer, like they did the right thing. Turns out they weren't lying. Yeah. But whereas like different like leaders from IHOP that have said horrible things and actually haven't apologized yet, and I mean that I know of, or have tried to make amends or make things right, they're on the side of the fence that is completely false. That's I can't rough. Imagine.
Yeah, that's really rough.
Being, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's totally valid. That's a really rough position.
Yeah, and again, it's very sobering. Like, my heart just hurts for those people and their families
that we grew up with.
Yes,
it's rough.
It's I can't imagine. That'd be really hard.
Super hard. And I think one more kind of super important event that we can talk about before closing is Tammy Woods.
Yeah. So
first off, I want to say that I think all of the women who have come forth, so Jane Doe, TH, and Tammy, are so brave.
Incredibly
But
brave.
I'm so mad that Jane Doe's story wasn't enough.
Yeah.
For everyone to wake the crap up. Mm-hmm. Because it should have been enough. She was 19, he was 45, he was married with children, like all those things. But when Tammy Wood's story came out, like, it broke people.
Yeah.
I mean, that article from the Roy's report of her firsthand account was shocking. Mm-hmm. It was disgusting and just so painful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when there was a turning point from that point on, because everyone was like, oh wow, this is true, and it's worse than we thought.
Yeah. Because it was a little bit before then what was it, the Miramax or whatever? What was the
yeah, that like lame report.
Like, it was like
McNamara.
Yeah, the stupidest thing I've ever. Yeah.
Yeah, that report fell short.
Real short. It was an absolute joke. And then, Tammy's stuff comes out, and that was the connection of St. Louis. Mm-hmm. So people that I work with every day, and like, I know Tammy's family, and there was a lot of connections within St. Louis to that whole situation, and it was just like, whoa, like, which I'm not gonna lie, like, from a selfish, like, just me perspective, I literally was like, I live in St. Louis. I cannot get farther and farther away from this, and yet still it keeps showing up at my door.
Right.
Like, totally. I was in Mexico during Christmas and somehow sat across, one of Mike Bickle's, like, what was the connection? Family member through marriage that they divorced later on, and just like sitting, and I was just like,
are you serious?
Yes. And it was one of those, like, do you really believe that this happened? And I'm like,
100%.
Absolutely. 100%. Like, I was just like, of course. What do you,
Yeah.
But, again, it was one of those, like, I'm not going to argue with you. There's literally
You're
no
entitled
point.
To your opinion.
Yeah, 100%. You think your own thing, but
Time will tell.
But I'm on the right side of the fence.
Just,
And so when I read Tammy's thing, it just, like, describing certain areas in St. Louis, I knew what she was talking about. I knew, like, some of the things
hit closer to home that way.
Yeah, like, even knowing Jane Doe's story and parts of things and whatnot, like, it also hit home because it was Kansas City and the House of Prayer, and like we were there in the trailer days. We were there when it was the strip mall, and when the strip mall had a Dollar General. Like, we were there from, like,
I bought a glass doll.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, those were the good days.
And then I broke it.
Yeah. But, like, we've been there through all of it, but then for it to be, like, a totally different city, different environment.
And it's
still there.
Yeah.
Like, and it just made me so angry. Because I was able to see in a different way still how much havoc Mike had wreaked in someone else's life. Mm-hmm. And it just,
like, it followed her for 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, but also to think of, then I got angry again of, and why wasn't Jane Doe's story enough?
Right.
Like, it should have been enough. What's
because the age difference was even bigger with Jane Doe. But I think the fact that she was, a minor was what really woke people up to going, oh, Mike's a monster.
Yeah.
He's a monster.
Yeah. And I think the thing of, like, it still, like, rung in my head of, like, oh, you can be Lukey's mom.
Ooh. That was ew. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a pretty significant turning point, I think, in January, of more and more people going like, oh, this is true. Mm-hmm. And that was when there was kind of that second round of exodus out of IHOP.
Yeah.
And again, I think that is really complicated because all those people at IHOP like raise support, and it takes time to communicate with all your supporters. It takes time to move the money to go through another organization. So,
which is so
I've had a lot of grace for people who have left kind of slowly because I understand how complicated that move is.
Yeah.
I have less grace for people like digging in and they're like, I still believe in the prophetic history. And I'm like, I'm fine. Pass. I don't need that. That's extra biblical.
Yeah.
The Bible's enough.
I think the one thing that I've had to wrestle with is we've known, well, we had a 2 month head start. So we got to kind of sort of start processing and grieving, even known we weren't really not like allowed to, but like
we couldn't talk a lot about it.
There's like no one you could talk to about it. But then how the waves of information, it's like you restart the grief process and it becomes compound interest of grief.
Right.
And then like you can't think clearly, you can't make decisions, you can't
we just want cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't figure things out. And I think what's hard is for those that even still today, like some are still at IHOP, like I love Jesus and I came here for Jesus. I didn't come here for Mike, and raising support and doing all the things, it hems them in a way that is actually really, 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 really difficult. And
it's really true.
But then in the process of, I just want to worship Jesus and be in the prayer room, they're also getting hit with, will you stand with Mike? But it's like, no, not everyone does. But then you also have like the Bickleites who are like
Bicklebots.
Mike Bickle's the greatest guy ever, and none of this is
the godliest man I've ever known.
And this is all, false and da-da-da. Like that's still going on.
Shockingly.
And then I just can't imagine. Like
it's so complicated for those people.
Yeah, and I think what's hard is, and I think it's really stupid, but I also, like, I am guilty of this. Like, I haven't said this out loud to someone, but I felt it of, like, there's almost, like, a competition of, like, who has, like, hurt more or felt more through this process. Like, it feels like I think
IHOP has a very unhealthy competitive atmosphere anyways because Mike wanted to foster competition so that
everyone felt insecure about the role.
Yeah. And I think that's seeped down.
Yes. And so, like, I even caught myself being like, because there's just so many things that I want to say, but I also feel like I want to be helpful. But just different things of like, can you believe that this happened? And I'm sitting there like, that happened when I was 2. Like, like I've lived that. Like, but also their story is still as valid, as important as mine is. And so is like, and, there's no validity taken away from any of the Jane Does. And it's just, there's so many degrees of chaos and pain. And it's just one of those things where it's like, you know what? This all started because of God. Like, none of this would have come to light without Jesus shining his light on this situation. Yeah. And no one's story is going to trump anyone's story. So everybody just
chill.
Yeah. Like, don't shut up. But, like, also, like,
you don't have to put anyone else down while you're sharing your story.
And I think that's so stupid. Like, it's, that's just my little, it drives me crazy.
So I think we're sharing all this to kind of show how we've processed, but also demonstrate this is an extremely complicated situation.
Super.
And it affects hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
In very different ways. Yeah. And I have hope that there's going to be some resolution in the future, but I mean, we're going to be processing and going through this for a long time still.
Yeah.
And I think in another episode, we'll share just how even we've processed this with the Lord and what our relationship with the Lord looks like now. Don't worry, we're still saved.
Yeah. We love Jesus.
But we've also grown up
a lot.
And we've matured and learned like the world ain't gumdrops and rainbows all the time.
Yeah, nope.
Turns out. So
yeah.
This is Green Room.
We love it.
Yeah. See ya next time.
All right.
Bye.